Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making, help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I'd like to invite my guests and welcome them. Today we have Kimberly Davis, who's an author, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Brave Leadership University, leading development programs worldwide around authentic leadership, purpose, presence, and influence. We have Lieutenant Colonel J.C. Glick, who's a retired Army Ranger. Thank you for your service. He is a leader, strategy, and culture advisor, as well as an author and TEDx speaker. And we have Stuart McLean, who's a speaker, author, and president of All Hoods Unite, providing mentoring, mental health support, and advocacy to the homeless. Thank you all for being with me today. And here is today's ethics challenge. It's a true story. A noted psychologist had just finished his address to a group of professionals when a member of the audience approached him and introduced himself. The psychologist immediately recognized the name. Before him stood a world-famous doctor, once featured on the cover of Time magazine, whose medical innovations had transformed treatments and revolutionized curative procedures. The esteemed doctor proceeded to confess that he had suffered his entire life from depression. As a boy, he loved to draw, and he had possessed a natural talent for artistic design. Growing up, he dreamt of one day becoming a successful architect. But his parents had other ideas. Architecture, they asked. No, you need to use your intelligence to support a family. You are going to medical school. And so he did, with almost unparalleled success. Nonetheless, despite his extraordinary contributions to medicine, the doctor felt unfulfilled in life for not having pursued his passion. Sometime later, the psychologist lamented the insistence of the doctor's parents, how they had deprived him of the life he had wanted and the sense of purpose that he never realized. When he finished, the psychologist found him confronted by several doctors from the audience. We know who you were talking about, they said. Do you have any idea how many lives were saved through his procedures and inventions? How dare you suggest that his own personal gratification outweighs the contribution he made to the world and the people he benefited? The psychologist later expressed his ambivalence. Were those doctors right? Was the cost of personal satisfaction outweighed by the value of the contributions to society? He admitted that he did not have an answer himself. And now we are in search of an answer. And the floor is open.
So what comes up for me when I first read this was that we do the best that we can with what we've got. And so lamenting his parents' behavior was actually causing him more suffering than accepting that this is what it is, and what can I do now to exercise those artistic muscles. And I think we tend to look at life as I can do this or this instead of this and this. Now, yes, can you be a famous architect and a very successful physician? Probably not at the same time. But I think you can be a very successful physician and design your own homes or do lots of remodels or exercise those creative muscles in a different way. And now he's at a turning point in his life where he could, after he's made remarkable things happen in his life, and he can make another choice for himself. Now, if I were to back up and be his parents, I would not have done what they did, but that's a whole nother strain of conversation. So I'll toss it out to the rest of you to pick up the next thought.
You know, you think about this situation, and what skews you, I think, is we start to look at this individual as a victim, as opposed
Mhm.
to a sense maker and a choice maker, right?
Yes,
Because those choices exist, right? And they're not the false binary choice that maybe we're creating this simplicity.
right.
And I think that we're assuming that, I mean, and there's lots of talks and I have lots of thoughts about regrets and whether that you should even have regrets. But I think that what was I started to think about this is, you get this initial idea of, oh my gosh, how horrible, he's a victim. But wait a second, he's not a victim, because we are not, especially if you're a high performer, which this individual was, we have free will. So there was a choice made. You don't have to listen to your parents, or maybe you feel you do, but that's still a choice, right? We're at some point, I think Freud was really big about saying that we are not what we have gone through. We are what we choose to be.
Yeah.
So I question, okay, so if there was a choice made, maybe it was a less optimal choice, but did he make it a more optimal choice? So those are kind of my thoughts when we start thinking about this problem set.
Yeah, I mean, he completely gives up personal responsibility in the situation, I think.
Yeah, and me also, I believe that he gave up, personal responsibility, and he just kind of let them kind of lead his life and lead the way. Even though his life, he was very high achiever and very successful, but it wasn't satisfying. It just was something that he did for them and not for himself. And even in life, it teaches you that you have to do things that make you happy and not just for others. That can cause you to be down and depressed, even though you can be operational in something, but that don't mean that in your mind that you're not still depressed about the situation.
To be happy is a choice.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that I agree with you, Stuart, in that he's doing it just for his parents, because I don't personally believe you can reach that level where you're making such a difference without having some connection to the purpose of why what you're doing matters.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a different kind of anchor and purpose than the artistic side of him. But I don't know that he could have reached the level of success where he's made such a tremendous difference in the medical community and to his patients without caring.
Well,
I don't,
man, but like sometimes per se, people, like a person can hate school, but they make amazing grades.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's true.
So
we have friends that the wife's father was a very successful attorney, hated every minute of it, but did extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment he married off his youngest child, he retired.
Yeah.
And he went back to study. For myself, I was something of a prodigal son. My grandfather had a law practice that I was offered the opportunity to go into, and my father had a construction company that I was offered the opportunity to go into, and instead I studied English and then went hitchhiking across the United States. My parents were not thrilled with my choices, but I do recognize that I've known families, and it also varies in certain cultures, where there's a very strong ethic of following the parents' path that they lay out. And I'm not going to sit in judgment of those who feel that they must do what their parents insist that they do. It certainly wasn't my experience. It wasn't the way I raised my kids, but I do recognize that is a a reality that, it would take something that's really quite extraordinary for a person to resist that if they grew up in that kind of a family culture. The other element here is that the parents, from their perspective, they were looking at, you choose a career path that is going to support your family.
Yeah.
Maybe they had an additional idea of, you want to do something that's going to benefit the world. Although that's not the way.
No,
the
but I
story was
agree with
told.
you. It was about supporting the family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when my oldest daughter told us she wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, and we said, that's fine, recognize that my wife and I are both school teachers. We are not going to be able to put you through medical school. You also want to have an Orthodox Jewish lifestyle, which means you want to have a family from a relatively young age. And so you're talking about huge amounts of debt, years of school, years of internship, years of residency while you're raising a family. Just make absolutely sure that this is really what you want before you go down this path.
Mm-hmm.
So parents do have a responsibility to make sure their children have their eyes open. And in the end, my daughter became an audiologist, is doing very nicely without the residency and the internship and the massive student debt. So
I have less issue with that. I mean, I've seen both sides on the parenting side, right? My children have done kind of what they thought they needed to do. Of course, they always feel like I have a preference. And to be honest with you, maybe I'm a bad parent, but I really don't. Like, I don't have a preference. They all think, whether it's what school they go to, what sports they played, what they do afterwards, they think I want something I don't. Like, I want them to live their lives. That said, I have less issue with the parents than I do with the people that came up to that psychologist afterwards and put this weight of everyone else. Do you know how many people he's helped? And that's why, wow, that's kind of a lot of baggage to throw on somebody else. And so I have no problem with a family member saying, this is what I think you should do. And this is what because, I've been around and the relationship is the relationship. But to assume that beyond my responsibility as a human being to not harm others, that I have a responsibility to do more than for those people. And that's, and my self-sacrifice or my privation is okay as long as it's helping others. I don't know. That's an interesting thought, right? I mean, now we're talking about almost this duty that's beyond Burkonian, right? It's not just, I mean, it's almost, it's way beyond that. It's about private, so for good of others. And that goes down to an extremely dangerous and slippery slope. And I also wonder if there's a significant amount of ego in that.
Yeah,
On behalf of the parents or on behalf of the
across the board, if we say the individual should like my sacrifice, like, and I see this in the veteran community. Well, I sacrifice so you don't have to. Nobody asked you to do that. And that's not, that's like, you joined the military because that was a choice that you had.
Right.
And, that, like, it's very personal. We all choose for different reasons. And I hate that in the veteran community when, well, I should get a discount because I was a veteran. I went to war. I got to be honest with you. That's the best thing I've ever done is go to war. Heck yeah, let's go. Like, I don't need a discount at, Chili's or Applebee's, right? Like, that's not what I'm looking for. So I think that there's the ego on the part of the individual. And then there's this idea that the others have, like, well, and I don't like it when I wrote a very controversial article in the veteran community. I wrote, stop thanking me for my service. And it was tongue in cheek. I understand that people like to thank. And in my mind, I'm not looking for that. I'd like you to just be not horrible to each other, right? Like, just be a good citizen. Don't be a jerk.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
You have no other responsibility than to not be a jerk. That's all I want. So I wonder about that. And so like, I'm very torn on this one because there's choice, there's ego, but I come from a very stoic mindset. I mean, we call them orders and not invitations. And once you get the order, that's just, you grow where you're planted and you accept.
I want to come back to that in a second, JC. Stuart, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when you was because at times we can be groomed to be able to do things also. Some people can say, well, I want my daughter or my son to be able to take over my company one day. So they groom them as they grow up and get older to be able to be the president of the company. And then they'll put guilt on them if they don't do it, and they'll make them feel bad if they want to go their own direction. And they was like, wait, I'd groom you for this my whole life. Because it's not really about them, it's about the parent.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and that, I think you're talking about how poisonous expectation can be in some way. The parent's expectation of him, the expectation of the medical community of him, his expectation that he should find happiness when he's not making other choices actively. I think the way we look at expectation without actively participating in it can really take us down a dangerous road.
Yeah,
I think that we all have expectation though, especially of our kids and other people. I mean, we all have expectation. It's just built in us to have.
And that's what, and maybe that's one of our biggest challenges is how do we let go of expectation and celebrate what is. But that, I mean, it's easier said than done, but maybe that's one of the great human challenges.
Yeah, I think expectations are the root of much evil. There's so many points I want to touch on here, and I'm not going to have time. But the point you were making. Well, wait. Go back to this point of the doctors who approach the psychologist. Their arguments seem to be, now that we know what this person has contributed, how can you find fault with the parents who pushed him down this path? And I always thought there was something somewhat disingenuous there, because if you have a crystal ball,
right,
and you can look into the future, I can see I'm going to cure cancer, I'm going to create procedures, I'm going to save lives. So now you could make the case, let me put my personal gratification on hold for the contribution I can make to humanity. And I think that you could have a debate about that. But as a child or a young person embarking on a career, there's really no way of knowing what contribution I'm going to make. Maybe this person would have created innovations in architecture and engineering that would have served the world in dramatic ways.
Right.
To say that now that we know what he accomplished, that will justify the parents pushing him down. I mean, maybe he would have become deeply depressed and committed suicide before he had the opportunity to do anything.
I think so much of what was going on with the parents was fear-based, right? You want your child to be okay. You want your child to be able to take care of themselves and their family. And we can assume, okay, well, what generation did these parents grow up in? If they grew up in the era of the Depression, they've got their own histories and baggage they're dealing with that come with that advice or request or demand, whatever it happened to be. That fuel that, and parents in a later generation may not look at the world in the same way. So
I think, Kimberly, I think you're 100% spot on with the fear-based. I also worry, though, I think there are parents, and I've seen it, that like to control.
Yes.
And they want to remain like, I gotta be honest with you. And I sometimes feel like a really bad dad. I have 3 kids, I have 3 step kids. Most of them are older. And I am dying for my kids to go out, do their thing, move away, become their own people. I had a daughter that drove out to California to start her life right as soon as she graduated college. You know, I have a son that, you know, 2 weeks after he graduated college, he's working in something that I never would have seen him do, but like he liked it. And I want them to like have their own lives. And I like, if they can't visit, I don't sit there and go, oh, you mean you're not going to be here for, dude, go
Yeah,
build life.
right.
I want you to. But I do see, and people look at me like I'm a bad dad, because like, I don't even go to college by me, like go where you want to go and go be a human. But a lot of parents want that control. They want, you know, and I see it all the time. They, you know, well, this is what you should be doing. Well, maybe.
But JC, don't you think at the root of control is fear?
Oh, no. And that's where I agreed with you, Kimberly. I think you're absolutely right. It comes from fear, but sometimes it's fear for success, right? Like my fear is always, and I know this is stupid. Like I'm going to just be vulnerable and tell you, I know this is wrong. However, my fear is I want my kids to be happy. That's what I don't want them to be unhappy. I know they're going to be unhappy at times, and it kills me.
Oh,
That said,
it's so hard. It's the hardest thing to watch your kids suffer.
that's a nice fear, Kimberly. And I think that's what you were alluding to. But then there's this fear of losing control. Like, well, wait, as my daughter gets married and she has another man in her life, then maybe I'm not the man anymore. Right. I think there's a real fear about that comes from parents.
And that's really a topic we could go into all on its own. When we define ourselves through other people. Then we really, we're not living our lives, and we're destroying or damaging other lives. And, you know, in Judaism, we don't take confession or give atonement, but I will absolve you, JC, of the sense that you're a bad parent. You know, what parents and teachers, and I've done both, our job is to make ourselves obsolete. I don't want my kids or my students needing me to help them learn, to help them make decisions. I don't mind if they call me and ask for counseling or counsel. I mean, we should turn to people with more experience for advice to help us make our own decisions. But to raise children to be independent, to stand on their own feet, to make their own decisions, and to live their own lives, I mean, that's how you create successful and happy human beings.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I think too at times that some parents, okay, like me, like my oldest son, he's 21. So I wanted him to go to the Navy because that's something he wanted to do. But he didn't go. But I didn't, when I was graduating from high school, I wanted to go to the military, but I didn't go. So that was like one of my regrets. So I was kind of pushing him more to go so I can live vicariously through him.
What great awareness.
You know, but it wouldn't be really fair if he didn't want to do that and I kept pushing him to do it. You know, that would have been like my ego in something I was trying to do for me and not really for him.
Well, and I think that's also that what does this mean about me? That the ego thing can go in another direction as well. So it's not just I want to live vicariously through you because this is about me. It can also be, well, what does it mean about me if my son is an artist instead of a doctor, right? And you see that in a lot of cultures where the only acceptable career paths are attorney, physician, you know, like this is what you will be.
Yep.
And if you're not that, the family loses face, right? It has an effect on the entire family, and they're standing in the community and all sorts of things.
You're right.
Yeah. You know, and it's funny you say that because my son, my oldest son, who's my middle child, he wanted to go be a ranger and after high school. And I said, okay, let's talk about this. And I said, I'd rather you go to college. And he was an athlete. So he had offers at like Johns Hopkins and to play SEC football and all these places. And I said, my first choice is not for you to be in the Rangers. If you decide that that's what you want to go do, then I will support that. But I do not think that is the best choice. But if that's a choice you make, I'm going to support you. Like I'm in. And I think you're right, though. I mean, both of you, we go back to this expectation. And I got to tell you, Rabbi, I really want to talk about it because I am 100% in agreement with you that expectations are the root of all evil. As soon as they start expecting things, or they feel like there are expectations, man, there's a control element there that is unhealthy for everyone involved. And are we really reaching our full capacity? So if you meet my expectations, maybe you were able to go much farther, right? And do much more. So boy, that's, I mean, and there's so much there in expectations.
And of course, part of it is there are expectations that are proper. In other words, I want my children to be upstanding, law-abiding, responsible. You know, I want them to be able to support themselves. I want them to have a moral compass. And those are expectations too.
That's true.
Right.
And those are, I think we should expect that, and we should try to raise our kids to have those values. And so often there's a blurry line. And in this case, I'm sure that this doctor's parents felt that they were doing what was in his best interest, whatever psychological biases or issues may have been lurking beneath the surface in their own minds. I'm certain that they felt that this was absolutely the best choice for their son.
Yeah.
And that's also something we have to be careful of, because we might think we're doing what's best for our children.
Right.
And
Sure.
I just really struggle with the fact that he would grow into adulthood, be so successful in medicine, and allow himself to not continue to pursue that interest, whether it's reading books on architecture at night, whether it's drawing, whether it's, whatever that is. I think we all have the capacity to be so much more than one thing in our lives.
Yeah, that's true. And that's true. And I don't think people think like that at times, that they can be. I remember a lady, she was a nurse. I guess she wasn't ready to retire. She was about in her 80s, but she still was practicing.
That's amazing.
And I told her, I said, wow, I said, you must love what you do. She said, I don't love it. I just do it. She says, she told me, she said, my parents forced me to do it because they wasn't going to pay for me to be able to be a dentist. What I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to be a dentist, but they told me they're not paying for that. So I just did it all my life because I found out I was good at it. I did it, but I never liked it. She said I have a great lifestyle. I live great, but it's something that I regret, that I wish I would have been a dentist. I said, wow.
It's interesting though, Stuart, maybe she would have been a dentist, because if you look at the skill sets involved in being a dentist and being a nurse, right? They're very similar, and it's a very similar interaction with the patient. So if she hated nursing, my suspicion is dentistry wouldn't be all she thought it was going to be either, right?
There is that grass is always greener.
That's expectation, right? It's the expectation.
Right. But we're just about the end of the first segment, but I'd like to try and tie this together a little bit. When you said, JC, that your ultimate goal for your children is you want them to be happy. And, happiness is a whole discussion in and of itself. What provides happiness? And I believe my tradition teaches that it comes from a sense of purpose, fulfilling one's purpose. So if I end up in a career that I might not have chosen in a perfect world, and for whatever reasons, I'm pressed that way, or circumstances lead me that way, whatever it is, but if I'm good at it, and if it's a job that is intrinsically contributing to the world, I mean, a doctor, teacher, I taught high school for 23 years. It was not a career path that I originally had in mind. It's just sort of the way things unfolded. And I had dreams of doing more than that. And now I am working towards the fulfillment of some of those dreams. But, there were times that I wasn't tickled pink about being a high school teacher. But I always felt the value of what I was doing, the contribution that I was making, and that I was using my skill set in a way that made the world a better place. And if we can, even if there may be some element that we're not achieving, goals we're not reaching, but we can study the old cliche about taking lemons and making lemonade. And sometimes it's not even lemons. Sometimes it's just not exactly what we have in mind. And then we let those expectations sour all of the
What
good
is.
and all the joy that could come from doing that good. That I think is a tragedy
I do
of a
too.
story like this. Not that he was unfulfilled, but that he didn't find the fulfillment in what he was doing when clearly it was there. So we have another half hour coming up in the second segment where we can continue this
Wonderful.
discussion, but we're going to wrap up the segment now. And so thank you all very much for a stimulating, fascinating discussion. Kimberly Davis, JC Glick, and Stuart McLean. For those of you who are watching and listening, if you'd like to suggest an ethical scenario or dilemma for the panel to take up, please go to my website, jonasandgoldson.com, and use the contact information there to submit your suggestion. If it's something compelling, we will definitely take it up in a future episode. If you are a Grappling with a Gray member, please use the community link to participate in a follow-up open forum and continue discussion. If you're not a member, please go to gwtg.live. That's gwtg.live. And you can sign up for a free 30-day trial and enjoy member benefits. Please join us again next week when we have another panel and another scenario and more Grappling with the Gray.